It's another edition of WRAL Triangle and 2. I'm Mark Bergen. He is Pat Welter. And by the time you're listening to this, ACC play will likely have gotten underway. We've got a UNC hoops game tonight. We're getting into the new year, Pat Welter. And I thought for today's podcast, with conference play either just right around the corner or starting again, depending on when people are listening, what some of the top storylines are as ACC play begins.
They're rich and abundant because we have a great year of Triangle basketball here with all three of our major teams here looking like they're going to not only make the NCAA tournament, but potentially make a run. Now, NC State kind of in a different bucket through non-conference play, which is something we can get into. Kindergarten's over, as Will Wade has stated so eloquently, and so is non-conference play because now things really begin.
All right, so do you want the first pick of any storyline involving the three Triangle teams? So specifically, we're focusing on Duke, UNC, and NC State. Do you want the first pick, Pat, or would you like me to do the honors?
You know, I'm going to defer to the second half. I'm going to defer to the second half. Right. I'm a little bit behind on my prep, so I'm going to take your cue here, and I will let you take the first pick.
All right, and listeners and viewers might accuse me of wishing the season away. The number one thing I want to know, which Triangle prospect will be the highest selection in the 2026 NBA draft? But more specifically, I'm looking at the head-to-heads when we see Duke and UNC go mano-a-mano, and specifically Caleb Wilson and Cameron Boozer.
It's a great one because so far I would say it's kind of defined the Triangle season, at least nationally, as these two guys. Because, you know, we dial into college basketball here in October, November, even before that, you know, in the summer doing our prep. The average people out there are like, all right, okay, so who's on these teams this year? Who are the freshmen to pay attention to? And every year you got to look at UNC, you got to specifically look at Duke. And I think the most interesting thing about this storyline is that UNC actually has a guy to match. Like, they aren't the one and done school that Duke has been with Paolo, Caro, you know, all the way down through the line, Cooper Flagg, Zion Williamson, Jason Tatum, all these guys that have populated the NBA.
Kyrie,
I mean, the list is long. The Brotherhood. UNC doesn't really have that in the NBA, and they're about to here with Caleb Wilson, who might be their best one-and-done player ever.
So that's what I'm looking at with Wilson. We're talking about a player, 9 double-doubles in 13 games so far this year, and I look at the juice that he provides. Remember they had the game earlier this year where it was like, oh, we're going to wear white. And then UNC's like, no, we're not going to wear white. But then it's like, no. Yes, we are going to wear white. And that's all due to the influence in the juice. And what I mean by that is just like, I can't recall in recent history a freshman player at UNC having that much sway when it comes to his ability, what he brings on the floor, but even then off the floor, kind of how that transcends and ultimately how far he can take this Tar Heels team.
Just an immediate alpha dog. He has been what Hubert Davis's program has needed, which is an edge, somebody that matches Hubert Davis's kind of zest for basketball and for life. The one thing I've always just kind of struggled with covering Hubert Davis's Tar Heel teams is why they don't often reflect the personality of the coach. Like, that's something you hear so much in sports, is that the team is a reflection of the coach. And Hubert Davis loves UNC, loves competing, wakes up every day like he's truly like a carpe diem kind of guy. And his teams oftentimes come out with a bit of entitlement, slow in the first half. We've seen this over and over and over again. You know, even as how many times have we had to like talk into late February, like, when is this team going to kick into gear? When are they going to have their make or break here as we're trying to get them into the NCAA tournament? And they've missed it under Hubert. They probably shouldn't have gotten in last year with no quad one wins. But now with a guy like Caleb Wilson, we're seeing that this is a different Tar Heel team. I think the overall talent of UNC, even beyond Wilson, is probably the best that Hubert has had. But Wilson is that X factor, that thing that they have been missing.
I thought it was pretty cool that Wilson on X, formerly Twitter, thanked people for getting his jersey with it being the holiday season. I thought that was pretty cool, and just having that awareness of the impact that he can make. But then again, don't forget about Cameron Boozer, who's like by far the high scorer for Duke right now, more than 20 points per game, and someone else who's going to be a lottery pick, Pat.
Yeah, I think maybe the reason we talked about Wilson first is because that's more the novelty, because we're not used to seeing that at Carolina historically. Like UNC gets one and dones, but they're more in the Drake Powell, Day'Ron Sharp. Like they're these guys that make the NBA but aren't necessarily ready to play, ready to star right away, or maybe never even become true stars. Like going all the way back to even Marvin Williams, who was one of the highest drafted one and done players for Carolina, and his NBA career never lived up. Whereas Wilson, to me, seems like a guy that could become an NBA star. And with Duke, that's just another year. And I think what's interesting about Cameron Boozer is he didn't actually come in, which is weird to say, with as much hype, given he is the son of Carlos Boozer.
It's true.
Was by far the number one prospect in this class, but coming on the heels of Cooper Flagg, that was kind of where there was a little tail off, but he's exceeded any and all expectations so far.
All right, so that's my top pick is the top prospects, the matchup and the battle. We'll eventually get to see him between Wilson and Boozer. Pat, the floor's yours.
Mine would be, when's that reckoning coming?
Oh, okay. We're going to get right into this now. Okay.
And I'm not saying that, I say that a little facetiously because I believe in Will Wade. I believe the reckoning is coming, but I have kind of accepted that the next part of that quote, that it's going to be here and it's not going to take a whole lot of time. Maybe we dial that expectation a little bit back because I think this NC State team is good. I think they have a potential to make a run in the tournament, even make the Final Four, but it's not going to be as a favorite. It's going to be as a team that gets hot at the right time, that the bracket breaks their way, similar to, the NC State team under Kevin Keatts that made it, or the UNC team under Hubert Davis that made it, that kind of makes a run as a higher seed and things just kind of break their way. Like, I like the pieces, but there clearly is a flaw in the construction. And maybe that's just the product of, it's hard to land a true rim protector in the portal. And that's been something they've been chasing all year. And then their star player, Darrion Williams, while he is a scorer, you've seen Will Wade call out this team's leadership directly and it seemed like a call out to his highest paid player and his highest scorer in Darrion Williams, that he needs guys that aren't so relaxed.
I'm glad you brought this up. So defeating Ole Miss in non-conference play to close out non-conference play, big win in Greensboro because it was the Wolfpack's very first Power 4 win this season. And it's like, had NC State lost that game, it's like, would that be more of a reflection of what's to come in conference play? Because Wade even said it before the season started when he was being introduced. It's not going to take us that long. We're going to make the NCAA tournament in year one. And so when he called out his team in it was one of the post-game press conferences, Pat, he then talked about the toughness of Quadir Copeland. He talked about the toughness of the transfer Van Allen Lubin as well. But then it was the players he didn't name specifically. And you're spot on with Darrion Williams, and then Trey Holloman was someone else he didn't mention. The quotes and the passion we see from him, that kindergarten is over, and this was coming off of a game where they broke the team record for most threes in a game. They won by 30 plus, was very telling to me, to where maybe where he thought this team would be to this point versus where they are in actuality. So it's like, that was one of the questions I had is, how well does NC State need to play in ACC games to make the ACC tournament? Or is that lone win against Ole Miss more reflective of what's to come for NC State once we get into conference play?
Yeah, well, I mean, the analytics would suggest that they're fine, right? Like they are number 32 in the net. So if they can hold serve here in the ACC and pick up another quad one win, two, they're going to be fine. But something about the analytics to me don't quite add up with what I've seen. Like for so much of the net rankings, UNC and NC State were very close to each other. Now UNC is separated. They're up to 16th in the net at this time I was recording. NC State double that at 32. So that separation feels more appropriate to me. And NC State's a team that was constructed analytically. Like, we've talked about this before. Will Wade creating his schedule was they kind of cater to the net. They blow out some of these bad teams, catering to the net, and then bringing in this lineup of players. They had kind of a model that suggested kind of a wins over replacement type thing. So when he says the reckoning is coming, it's not going to take a whole lot of time. He's not just being a blowhard. He actually has that based in some analytical fact. But I think what we've seen is that numbers aren't always perfect. The math doesn't always math. And not having that true 7-footer has really limited this team's ceiling so far. But again, you're comparing to the absolute cream of the crop in Duke and a UNC team that's the most talented Hubert has had. But that's the neighborhood you're living in.
Yeah, Van Allen Lubin, the team's starting center for now, and then we'll see how Moussa Sagna comes along off the bench. Those are your two big men for better or for worse, but how they fare and if that lack of not having a true 5 matters once you get into conference play. Okay, I'll go to my next pick, Pat. We talked about Caleb Wilson, Cameron Boozer. What I want to know, who is the third best player in the triangle? And so I've got a short list. I mean, we mentioned Darrion Williams, Quadir Copeland on NC State, Henri Veesaar, maybe Isaiah Slim Evans at Duke, but who emerges as, we know who the top 2 are here with Duke's best of the best, UNC's best of the best, but who the third best player is, who emerges into that role is something that I can't wait to watch.
We could roll back the tape to when we were talking about college basketball way at the beginning of the season, and off a preseason game, I said here that I thought UNC might be the best team in the triangle.
This is true.
That take has aged well. I think other people are seeing that. Maybe they take the overall roster at least of UNC over Duke's, and I would champion that. Henri Veesaar is clearly that player that you're talking about, and I think that's the flaw with Duke right now is Boozer's averaging 23 and 10. He leads the team in assists and steals. He leads the team in virtually everything. Patrick Nangba leads the team in blocks, and he's probably actually been their second best player. Evans up and down, and he's a little bit limited in his game. He's a shooter. I think he's improved other areas of his game. He's very long and lengthy. And I think defensively, Jon Scheyer, one of his best attributes is getting these elite prospects to buy in defensively. I think we're seeing that with Duke. But if there's a flaw in that machine, it's kind of like they don't have the true depth, which is weird to say given all those guys' prospect rankings. But when we watch it out, the depth doesn't quite match what I see with UNC.
With Veesaar as well, just the size is what really sticks out to me, where it's he gets close to the hoop and it's a dunk, where it's almost an automatic 2 for him anywhere around the rim. And I think once you get into conference play, once you get into March, Pat, where buckets gets a little bit harder to get. It's being able to have a big guy down there that can more than hold his own, can dominate in the paint is going to be huge. So I'm with you there. That's where my money would go to, or it's if you have to pick one, who's it going to be? Give me Veesaar for UNC. And
I'll get to my next pick, but it might even be Seth Trimble might even be the next one. Speaking to that difference, maybe I'm just biased right now for UNC, but that's where I sit. My next pick is going to be back to Duke. Can Jon Scheyer win the big one? Now, that's the headline. I believe Jon Scheyer can and will win a national championship at Duke.
He's so young still. I mean, we're talking about the coach fastest to 100 wins in college basketball history. Think about all the ACC legendary coaches that there are. He's the fastest. So a good track record to start. You could argue that they choked in the Final Four a year ago, but still with the young squad. And it's are there lessons learned that he learned as a coach to where when his team in his current roster, which is going to continue to change year over year, will he know what to do in those scenarios to put his team in the best position to win?
And we saw kind of a recap of the Houston game versus Texas Tech, right down to the uniforms, just very similar color scheme, a team from the state of Texas, a team that, came to play and it overcame a double-digit deficit in the second half to beat Duke. Now, it's their only loss It's on a neutral site game at Madison Square Garden. Like, I'm not going to bury Jon Scheyer or write some column that they're cooked, but I thought it was eyebrow raised a little bit that, like, hey, this looked a little like Houston all over again in this team that's built around one player in Cameron Boozer, and last year's team, which certainly wasn't built just around Cooper Flagg, but everything went through Cooper Flagg and those late game moments. Now, it's been interesting. Cooper Flagg at the end of games, all those losses we talked about at the beginning of last year where he didn't come through in the final minutes, and then at Houston, it was the same thing. In these final minutes, we've seen Cameron Boozer defer. So that's been a change where Boozer, it was the game-winning shot versus Florida. Boozer draws the screen, kicks it to Isaiah Evans. And I'm trying to remember who took the last shot against Texas Tech, but I believe it was a similar play again.
Yeah. More importantly, too, the comparisons to the Final Four, Pat, blowing a 17-point second-half lead against Texas Tech. So I'd rather get some of these losses out of the way early. And to Duke's credit, go look at the non-conference schedule, Pat. It's crazy how tough it was. So for Duke to emerge with only one loss, I say is a victory for Duke, considering all of the ranked teams that the Blue Devils played before we even get into conference play. I'd argue their non-conference schedule, when you're talking about all of the ranked teams Duke played, might even be more difficult than what we see in the ACC this year.
100%. And I think that speaks to Jon Scheyer's ability to self-reflect. I mean, this schedule, he knows he has young teams every season. And so they don't have time to grow up later. And the ACC is not what it used to be. So you're seeing this from both UNC and Duke. And some of it's just them leveraging their brand. And all these TV networks obviously want to have them in these December, November games. So it works for all parties involved. But Duke beats Kansas, Arkansas, Florida, the defending national champion, and Michigan State, who is UNC's lone loss on the season. So, yeah, we can give them a hard time for Texas Tech, but got to give them credit for those wins at the same time. 4-1 already in Quad 1, number 3 in the nation in net.
I'm trying to see just look at the sequence of this this Duke Texas Tech game because Boozer had some buckets down the stretch. Trying to see because he missed a free throw.
Yeah, it was like right before Christmas, so I've kind of forgotten it. But it was a heck of a day. Like that day, UNC nearly lost to Ohio State in Seth Trimble's return.
Well, with Boozer, it says missed a 3-point shot at the very end of the game. And again, they only lost by a point, too.
So Boozer did take the final shot in that one. But I guess the point remains that against Florida, he didn't. They were able to use, the defense drawing onto him, kick it to Isaiah Evans for a better shot, something we hadn't seen much last year with Cooper Flagg.
All right, so whether the Duke can get back to the Final Four or not, huge question mark there. I guess I'm up, Pat. Let's see here. You mentioned Seth Trimble. We could have a deeper conversation about that, but I kind of want to open this up more big picture and specifically about Hubert Davis. How do the Tar Heels fare knowing that the roster is fully his now? You don't have a single player left over from Roy Williams. It seemed like R.J. Davis was never going to run out of eligibility.
Maybe he can come back the way things are going now in college basketball.
But how UNC fares with a roster that's molded in Hubert Davis's image entirely to this point, and off to a really good start. They're up to number 12 right now. And really, to me, it's going to be very telling getting into conference play. By the time people are listening to this, we'll already know how they fared in their very first ACC game of this season. But then, too, once you get up against the best of the best, once you play the Dukes of the world, how do you stack up? How do you stack up against the best of the best? And so I'm really excited to see with Caleb Wilson. I mean, you said this several weeks back too, Pat, that he's in line right now to be UNC's best one-and-done player ever. And you just need to look back at the history. And so, you like that there. The size Veesaar has, the veteran leadership that you get with Seth Trimble and his return, and then what that does with Luka keeping his starting spot, and then Jaron Stevenson moving to the bench. I mean, at least against East Carolina, season high 12 3-pointers for UNC. So how Hubert Davis's roster fares, knowing that these recruits are all his now, and it's like, we're talking about this several years later, but just the impact of the modern college basketball landscape, the additional season a lot of players got with COVID. I want to see how UNC fares and getting back to being a true blue blood and not being in a position where it's like, oh, UNC sneaking into the tournament and making the field of 68. Can you get back to being a Final Four, a perennial national championship contender year in and year out?
With Hubert Davis, it's almost like UNC made this thing too big to fail. You hear that term, that's kind of a Wall Street term about the banks being too big to fail, the brands being too big that they would have to ultimately succeed. And I kind of think that's what's happened here with Hubert Davis. And through his tenure, there are definitely things you could poke holes in. And I know there are UNC fans out there that have wanted a new coach this whole time. And I've been frustrated covering it. I've already mentioned kind of the repeated, like, his answer to everything seems to be we need more energy, effort, toughness, and rebounding. Like, there doesn't ever seem to be answers beyond that. And maybe basketball just is that simple, but I often want more.
Last year, too, he didn't have the roster to be able to do that. And it's funny with Van Allen Lubin going over to State now where we talk about, okay, the Wolfpack's lack of a true five. He was UNC's tallest player in its starting lineup. At, what is he, like 6'6", maybe 6'8"? And so, to your point, though, Pat, last year, I don't think he had the roster to do that. You've gone to cover these games in person. You could better tell me this than me watching on TV or maybe catching a game here or there in person. But when the Tar Heels lined up against other competition, they were much shorter. They were much, much shorter than the competition. It's like, 94 feet, the rims are 10 foot tall. It's like having length is definitely going to help you, not just in terms of scoring the basketball and getting close to the hoop, but defensively too, and the importance of deflections too. UNC didn't have that a year ago.
Yeah, totally. And that's what's plaguing NC State right now, because to a certain extent, you can play as hard as you want, but you can't get taller. And just being able to affect shots, affect the passing lanes has such a massive impact. Like you saw at UNC last year, would play hard and still give up an open three. But when you've got 3 extra inches on the perimeter on your wingspan, you can affect that shot. And it adds up over the course of possessions in a game. And with this team, to all their credit, UNC added a GM, Jim Tanner, to help make sure that the roster construction of last year's team did not happen. I would conjecture that this year's team is worth more money than last year's team. I don't know the exact number. I know they gave them the most they could in the revenue share, about $7 million allotted from that. And I would, from what I've read and what I've heard and what I see, I would imagine there's probably double that is the total roster, is the kind of number you see out there. And it shows. Like, this team is talented. They got the 7-footer. They've got the fabulous freshman. They've got a veteran in Seth Trimble. So it's all there. So kind of piggybacking off your storyline, what is a successful season for Hubert Davis? I think it is they have to be among the best teams in the ACC throughout the regular season. They need to be competing for a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. And even that maybe isn't a high enough standard for the real Tar Heel fans out there. They're like, no, we're UNC. We're a 1 seed year in, year out with, some reasons for excuses. So I think they could be a 1 seed. And I think once you get into the dance, I don't want to say you have to get to the Final Four, but you got to get to the second weekend with this kind of talent. But, if they do lose, they run into a buzzsaw or a perfect storm. I think it all just kind of depends on what it looks like. Like, if you did kind of get that high seed, if you were among the best teams in the ACC all year and you just kind of run into the wrong opponent, I'll give you a pass for that. But if there's a way this breaks where you're looking at it and you're just like, wow, Hubert Davis had everything at his disposal, no excuses. No excuses in 2025-26.
And at the time of this recording, Pat, the first-ranked conference opponent they'll have is January the 24th at Virginia, then Saturday, February the 7th at home against Duke. Right now, those are 2 of your ranked teams if you're UNC, so 2 games to circle on your calendar. But I'm looking at this as well, mid-January, on the road at Stanford on January the 14th, then January the 17th at Cal. Don't know exactly their travel plans, but imagine they stay out on the West Coast during that trip versus to go out west, come back all the way to Chapel Hill, and then go back out west all within the matter of days. How that shakes out for UNC, being on the road in the New World Order that is the ACC, and that's not the All-Coast Conference, that's the Atlantic Coast Conference, Pat. That's what I'm looking at. So it's like, again, I'm looking at the ranked matchups and then, the first few games, but then what happens on the West Coast too, just given some of the travel challenges that you'll face given this conference's expansion. So that's where I'm at with that.
How many more picks we got to make?
I've unloaded the clip, Pat. So, we talked some about Seth Trimble's forearm too. Just if there's any lingering effects, I thought he looked good in his return.
Definitely.
I want to get a bigger sample size to kind of see, is there anything there as a freak weight room accident? But certainly good to see him back on the floor for UNC.
Yeah, I think kind of like next level, lower tier down storylines is the guard rotation for UNC. I was at Hubert Davis's press conference this week. That was one of my questions I didn't get to. I asked him about Caleb Wilson and the freshman wall, if there is one, and he's like not worried about that at all. And I don't think you should be. This kid's built different. But the question I didn't get to ask was guard rotation, and I think that's going to be something interesting to watch because through Trimble's injury, we saw other guards get in the rotation, and it was Derek Dixon who hits the big shots in that huge win at Kentucky, which, if anything in the non-conference, that was probably the most telling performance on the road at Kentucky in a close game. They come out on top, and it's Derek Dixon who comes through. Kyan Evans is the point guard they brought in from Colorado State. He hasn't quite found his niche. He leads the team in assists. He could shoot well from the outside, but he's a little smaller. And Dixon, I know there's a segment of the UNC fan base that thinks Dixon should play over Evans. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I don't know if I'm quite there yet. He's a true freshman. Yeah, he hit that big shot. Everybody gets excited about the freshman recruits. I just think it's going to be a rotation, and however Hubert manages that, like he likes to say, I don't know when or where your number will be called, but it will be called. And that is certainly like a theme with this team, I think, is when guys' numbers will be called and if they can come through.
The roster just seems to fit better than it did a season ago when, to me, R.J. Davis and Elliot Cadeau's skill sets were just too complementary. And they're both undersized guards, so yes, you want to have both of them on the floor. But then the disadvantages that creates with the lack of length that they have just as players, as undersized guards, you don't have that same problem this year if you're UNC.
No, because they can play, like even if they do play two small guards, Trimble is elite athletically and defensively, and then you could put Jaron Stevenson at the 3, which is he's 6'10", if you want to make up for that length, or you could play a little bit smaller and put Jonathan Powell at the 3 who can knock down a 3. Jaden Young can knock down 3. So he's got a lot of options. It's a very deep bench for UNC.
So will you be at the game tonight against Florida State?
Yeah, I got a couple ACC openers today and tomorrow, so I will see UNC. First time I've been to their game in a little bit after a little break, so I'll be UNC FSU and then NC State. They play Wake Forest on New Year's Eve, so I'll be at that, and then I'll be watching Duke on TV. I can't get the 2 games on New Year's Eve, but plenty of sports to watch on that day.
Have a blast, Pat. I'm excited to see what some of your observations were for being boots on the ground, and if you're enjoying this holiday season, now that we're transitioning from football to basketball, enjoy the ability just to cow trot, Pat. I am so jealous of that, of just to be able to just take it all in. And it's like there's almost too much sports on, which has been great as the football season starts to wrap up here. And again, we're into conference play with hoops, baby, so bring it on.
Yeah, I am drowning in content. If I'm not watching games, I'm watching Stranger Things, and I'm super frustrated by its terrible dialogue. But you know what? I'm a completist. I'm going to get through it, Stranger Things.
You still have the finale, though, with, what is it, New Year's Eve that comes out?
I still have the finale. Okay. And, the set pieces are as good as ever. The budget's super high, but they clearly have actors aging problem. They don't kill anybody off. The dialogue is just like blah, 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 my feelings, blah, blah, blah. Let's come up with a ridiculous plan. Do you watch the show?
I haven't watched a second of it, so I know about its pop culture significance, but in terms of specifics of it, like I could name some of the actors and actresses in it. Beyond that, I'm clueless.
I'm a big Stephen King fan, and they draw a lot from Stephen King and like the Spielberg movies of old, but it has a problem that a lot of Stephen King books have, which is when they get to the ending and they're actually confronting the monster and the mystery's kind of gone, it just devolves into nonsense. And instead of like taking a step back from the nonsense and just powering through it, which a lot of horror movie do, they just like, oh, don't worry about the logic. It's cool. Well, this movie tries to explain it, and it's just like drones on and on, these plans of like how we're going to defeat a monster from a demon underground. We don't need that to make sense. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. It's not real. They try to make it make sense, and it's just ridiculous.
Next time on WRAL Triangle in 2. I'm just kidding. He's the one and only Pat Welter. I'm Mark Bergen. This has been another edition of WRAL Triangle 2. And if you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. 5 stars and 5 stars only. Pat, enjoy the hoops. Enjoy the finale of Stranger Things, my friend.
Yes, to quote Stranger Things at Kate Bush, I'll be running up that hill.
So long, everybody.